Paul here from My Perfect Failure, helping you turn your failures into successes and your setbacks into opportunities. Imagine being hit by a car, battling cancer, and still finding a drive to scale a business to over $80 million. How do you keep moving forward when life throws everything at you? My guest today, JC Chamberlain, has done exactly that. He's a serial entrepreneur, 2 sports national champion, and the author of the incredible book, Antidote. In this episode, JC opens up about the accident that almost ended his life, how his battle with cancer has reshaped his outlook on life, and the lessons he's carried from building a multi-million-dollar business to writing his book, Antidote. This conversation really shows the incredible strength of the human spirit, and I'm convinced you will come away inspired just as I was. So if you're ready to discover how to turn even life's biggest setbacks into fuel for growth, hit play wherever you get your podcasts.
Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore, and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome everybody to another episode of My Perfect Failure. Today I'm super excited because I have another amazing guest for you. So what if you could increase your resilience, self-respect and quality of life starting today? Well, you can. My guest today is a serial entrepreneur who offers inspiring insights and real life stories that will motivate you to clarify your goals, set them in motion, and improve your life, health, relationships, and your career satisfaction. So a very warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, JC Chamberlain. How are you?
Thank you so much, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you. I have to acknowledge, thank you for your flexibility with, agreeing kindly to have this call later on today. And then I arrived a little bit late for the scheduled call, but I'm glad that you were patient because, as I said to you a second ago before I hit the record button,
The pickleball has become a phenomenon, and they talk all about skills in pickleball.
yeah,
I didn't plan to bring this up, but since you mentioned this, I was reading something about the most underrated skill in pickleball. And, what do you imagine it is? It's not the spin. It's not the drop shot. It's not the slam. It's patience.
really,
It's patience. And I've said this so many times in a game. If you can just wait one moment longer, the ball will drop just a little bit. And it will give you better control in your response. And in the perfect relationship world, it's called holding your tongue. You just wait for one. It's a skill, actually.
Yeah,
Patience is a skill, and we can teach it.
Do you think that comes with maturity, wisdom, and confidence, that we develop that patience to wait and to come in when we need to come in, not interject just for interjecting's sake?
Sometimes while I'm sitting at an intersection, I say to myself, and again, this is the self-talk, I say, wait 3 seconds after the light turns green, and then go. And it gives you a moment to breathe. Yeah, I mean, most people are playing hedgemanship. It's like brinksmanship in world affairs. They're edging up and they're edging up and they're
That's what I'm thinking.
anticipating the green light, and then all of a sudden they're on the gas. And I find it super valuable to my own mental health to just take a breath and count to 3.
Yeah.
And you're probably not going to get a horn behind you unless you're in New York City, where they honk anyway. But give yourself that 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that you can bring into relationships. Is most of what we do in a conversation is we're already thinking of the next thing we want to say. But if you pause and you think about it a moment, it allows you to really integrate what it is that they said. Then give a more thoughtful response.
As you were saying that, I've kind of done what I should have done. I should have taken 3 seconds. But I was thinking that sometimes I will be having conversations with people and I'm thinking about interjecting. And I think I'm thinking about interjecting just almost as a reflex rather than me needing to interject at that time. So it's almost like, oh, I want to say something, but as a reflex, but actually I don't really need to at this time. So when I have the awareness and I'm in that moment and I'm thinking about it, then I hold back. But then sometimes I might interject. I'm thinking, Paul, why did you interject there? Because they haven't finished what they were talking about. So the reason I'm saying all that is because I like the 3 seconds rule. That is something I'm going to adopt because it's a good yardstick to control that bad habit that I've built up over the years.
It's a good one. They say that a really good conversation should be more like a dance, right? There's real motion between 2 people, right? And it gets more complicated if there are more than 2 people. But one of the things that the insurance industry was trying to figure out which doctors were going to cause them problems. Okay. And they have a technique for filming conversations between doctors and patients. And they measure the micro movements so they can slow the film way, 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 way down. They film it in real time and then they analyze it. And you can see the nonverbal interaction between the doctor and the patient. And the ones who get sued are the ones who communicate they don't care. They may say something, but they're nonverbal. They're completely disconnected from the patient. And they can't wait to get out of there or get the bill or whatever. And it's obvious. And so they learn by measuring micro movements in these interaction pairs. It doesn't even have to be with a real patient. It's just where the doctor is required to talk to somebody who is presenting themselves as a patient. And they were able to very accurately predict the ones who would more likely to be sued for malpractice.
That's incredible.
Incredible. Yeah.
That is incredible.
And it's a very small number, and it has nothing to do with how qualified they are as a medical doctor.
That is incredibly insightful and a good reference point. So JC, I said at the outset I was very I was keen to meet you. So we had a little preamble before we hit the record button, but this is our first time properly meeting. But you've got an incredible journey. What I thought, if we could start here, is maybe capture a little bit of you, your background, where you were raised and what childhood was like and what impact that had on you. I know your mum, I'm sure your dad did as well, but I know your mum had a profound impact on you, the development of some of the kind of the life lessons that she instilled in you from a very, very early age. So it'd be lovely to capture that. But also, clearly, you had a very challenging time with your accident and cancer. So why don't we start from the beginning and then we can cascade into some of the events that have led to this wonderful human being that you are today.
Well, thank you. It's interesting when people ask me about my mom. I had to think about where those early influences came from. She would, in moments that required some reassurance to us, she would say, "Don't worry, nothing is going to be okay." And seriously, how do you think that made me feel? But as my life unfolded, I realized that she meant it. And she understood from the beginning that things are not going to go our way in the world. And when you understand that and you integrate that into your life plan, it makes a profound difference in whether or not you have a good life or a bad life. So I think once you understand that that's the reality out there, you can start to bend the arc of human events in your favor. In my case, I responded to that by always being pushed by her to excel at something. And I think I worked harder because of her influence. But one thing that she always asked me after my racing, as I finally did get active as an athlete, and it was, she always wanted to know, how did I feel? She didn't initially ask me, what place did you get? What was the time of the event? Who did you beat? It was, how do you feel? And she celebrated that. She just had a way of doing it, whether it was conscious or not. And I think that that's how I evolved as a person in my ability to deal with setbacks, because she was focused on my emotional health, right? And I think that was a high level of concern for her. She was very high function, high intellect person who had a very low self-esteem. And so I grew up with a mom who was depressed, clinically depressed. And I was the one who had to find the keys in the house. I had to take the grocery list at age, 13 or 14 and figure out how to get to the store and buy the stuff and bring it home. And my dad was gone at that point, and my brother didn't want to have anything to do with my mom. And so I had this, that was a perfect recipe for a youth that's going to get into trouble. And for some reason, her influence, made all the difference for me. Her saying to me, how do you feel? Her saying to me, don't worry, nothing's going to be okay. The reality is, I'm going to help you over prepare for life.
Can I interject? So when she was saying to you, don't worry, nothing's going to be all right or okay, did you understand what she meant when she said that?
I think her constant pushing on me to excel at things raised my life to a different level. And it wasn't just sports, because I had rheumatic fever as a 4-year-old, and they said, as a 6-year-old, they told me I'd never be able to do sports. So the only thing I wanted to do was sports, of course. And at age 7, I realized that sports wasn't going to be an option for me. So I dragged my parents to the stringed instrument demonstration at the local high school. And, I was 7 years old, so I was still in elementary school. And I wanted to play the violin. And they refused to buy me a violin. They thought this was a flash in the pan, and they rented one. And I would kneel on the floor in front of the record player and play with the symphony. I was just like Suzuki Method, but I could hear the music. It was just something in me that wanted to play the music. And I played 3 hours a day from age 7 on, until I was the concertmaster of my, middle school orchestra. And I wound up playing in the youth symphony at the state level in Ohio, where I grew up. And in college, I played in a band for 6 years. I played the fiddle. And so I played classical and country, and it was a thread that continued even after I was able to do sports. But I realized early on that there's a tremendous power in deep immersion. This is something that Malcolm Gladwell talks about in Outliers. He says the 10,000 hour rule, that Bill Gates had figured out a way to spend 10,000 hours testing his programs on a computer at the University of Washington. So he was able to get the kind of deep immersion in the thing that he was really interested in that allowed him to write Word and later on develop Microsoft. I realized that because of I had been held back as a child, and then at age 10, I was given a one-speed bicycle, and I could ride my bicycle to the baseball diamond. And since I wasn't supposed to do sports, I was the catcher.
Okay.
And I determined that I would figure out a way to throw a runner out at second base, and I would do it so accurately that nobody could beat me. And I practiced and practiced just like I was playing the violin, and I got really good. And kind of the hidden in all of that was that I was riding my bicycle to baseball. And so after my dad left, around age 12, I started riding 100 miles because I had already discovered that I had some depth to be able to do long bike rides. And I loved this. And at age 13, we rode the whole perimeter of France in one summer. And the next summer, we rode from Seattle to Boston. And we rode 100 miles a day for 40 days.
And did you enjoy the cycling? A silly question, probably, but so 100 miles is pretty incredible. So, how old were you when you first did that? So when you first
I was 12.
Okay, so that's extreme for a 12-year-old. So did you enjoy that?
I loved it.
Really?
Yeah, I just it was a kind of freedom for me because I think because I was a sickly child, there was something dangling out there that I couldn't have, and serendipity is what a friend of mine calls it, where you have serendipity and destiny collide together. And the one thing my mother was willing to do was give me a one-speed bicycle to get to baseball so that I could at least be on a team of something. And the hidden beauty in all of that was that I discovered that I loved being on two wheels. And since then, since 1970, I've ridden over 440,000 miles.
Wow.
And I found something that I loved, and it kept that teenage kid who potentially could have gone the wrong direction occupied in something, creating goals, learning things about the world in a way that I couldn't learn any other way. And so I had experiential success that came out of this, what other people would have looked at my childhood and said, he's going to have a bad life. And it didn't turn out that way. And another thing my mom would say, I want to finish up about my mom. She'd say, remember, we're all in this alone.
Which is the opposite to not really what we hear.
Most people are thinking, she really dished it up to you as a kid. But what she meant, and it took me a long time to really integrate this idea, and I started getting clues. Success leaves clues. I'm a big believer that even though we're talking about failure today, I realized that in my early bike races from age 14 on, that we're all just a bundle of energy. And that my energy was there in alignment with these other kids. And that to win a race, I didn't always have all the energy I needed in order to do that, to pull that off. And so I would borrow some energy from the kid next to me who was not aware. That's a little bit of mental gymnastics, right? But if you think about the thread that connects you and me and how you are responsible for your edge of the amazing fabric of humankind. And each one of us is a thread in this amazing connected fabric that is humankind and everything else that's around us, everything we built, everything we grow. We have this incredible energy that runs all around Earth. We really have a remarkable place to live in. And I realized that I could borrow energy from other resources to achieve my goals. And that was a fundamental awareness that I developed early on. Maybe it was because of what my mom said, don't worry, we're all in this alone. The reality is we're all connected, and I'm responsible for my piece of it.
Yeah.
And so that's the alone part, but the connected part is super important. And I've been able to use that in business. I've been able to use that in my athletics, in my writing, in my marriage. I use that concept every day.
Okay. And is that when you say about energy and being connected? So are you thinking about being connected to people that radiate, infused energy? Because we can all be around people that sometimes we just out of habit, we keep these connections going. But sometimes we can have connections with people that maybe they're a bit negative, they moan a lot about things that are just, and maybe for them it's habit. They've gotten the habit of not being able to see the opportunity in situations. So it's an automatic reflex is to maybe project not very good energy. So I guess at some point, did you become super aware of what good energy looked like, and that's what you could lean into?
Right. That's right. I mean, it's in a manner of speaking, it's some people call it mirroring.
Yeah.
So I would get into a business meeting and I would look around the room for the good energy. And I would just go sit next to it, even though I was supposed to be negotiating something on that from the opposite side of the table. I would go to that side of the table where I felt the good energy. I could see whether it was in their face or their body language. And if they had their sleeves rolled up, I'd get my jacket off and I would roll up my sleeves because I wanted to get in sync with their energy on the surface, because when you do that, it allows you to get down into where it's the valuable stuff, which is the really good stuff in a meeting like that, where you turn an adversary into an aligned party.
Yeah, that's a skill.
And I felt like I had a lot more successful business meetings because I would look at the room that way. And I think it was transformative for me.
Did you find that quite fun to be able to know how to isolate the energy?
Yeah.
And then
absolutely. I mean, I talk about it a little bit in the book. When I was rowing, I was at Princeton, and there was always somebody in the boat that had something going on that didn't bring their attention into the boat. They were thinking about their pre-med, their law career, their whatever they're going to do with their life. And we needed them to be present in the boat, taking good strokes and putting out the right effort. And so I discovered that I could walk down the length of the boat after practice and I could feel where there was a problem. And I'm not claiming something to brag here. I'm saying that I was seeing those people as a thread of this huge fabric, that I was a part of the fabric with them. It wasn't that I was separate from them. And some of the guys were open to this and some of them were not open to this concept. But I felt that if we would stop trying to do everything 100% ourselves, right? I said to all of them, not all of them were receptive to this. I said, try this concept. Give 90% instead of 100%. Imagine the boat race, right, on the Thames, right? And imagine those athletes giving only 90%. first of all, it's counterintuitive. But I said to them, think of your energy as being inside of a pipe, and your energy is flowing through that pipe, but 90% is all you've got. And allow the universal source of energy to come into that pipe with you and fill up the last 10%.
And is that energy?
Energy, the universe, God,
Okay.
whatever you want to call it. Allow that to come in and be a part of you because it's there for you. Instead of saying, I'm going to do this all myself. And the reality is, our boat started to go faster. We were all physically over prepared, but everybody was. I mean, everybody came to those races, over prepared. So what was the difference? And I think if you can shift your mentality in these kinds of things to do 90% and allow the universal energy source to come in, it can make a huge difference. Yeah.
I guess for some people, to the uninitiated, that can sound a little bit counterintuitive to only operate at 90% and embrace the, life's energy to make up the difference. I know I'm with you, but it's just an observation that some people may think, particularly when you think about, not that I'm a professional athlete by any stretch, but you kind of, when you say, if I watch, I don't know, sports and event, and they always talk, the experts, at the start of a football program or baseball or cricket or whatever, they will say, well, they've got to win this, they've got to give 100%, they've got to focus on 100%. Throw away comments, but that's how it's positioned, on occasions if you watch sort of sports and events.
Well, they say a great marriage is when both people give 110%. But I think that's the wrong concept. But here's the idea, is that love is inefficient, right? When we give of ourselves, when we're doing caring, really empathic caring, that's the good stuff. And if you ascribe to this 90% idea, right? Give 90% and allow 10%, allow God to come in. Whatever that universal energy source is that's out there, that's in every breath that you take, is a miracle. And, there are a lot of ways that I could explain my athletic success. I spent years and years taking credit for it all myself. And I think that was the wrong idea. I mean, it was just an incomplete idea. It wasn't necessarily wrong. It was incomplete. And I think that there's more to it. And that's why having now, 68 years to think about this and having plenty of setbacks and a lot of success, even now. I mean, I won a race last weekend, 100-mile race.
Wow.
Versus 400 people. And I hung with the leaders. I hung with the leaders, and they were 30 and 40-year-olds. And at one point, I thought, I'm not sure I can go this fast for 400 miles. And suddenly, after 30 miles, they quit. They just dropped off. And I rode 70 miles alone.
That's incredible.
And it was just one of those things where I got what I was thinking about. I didn't expect it.
Okay.
And you can't always expect those things, but I think the combination of being as prepared as you possibly can be and always thinking of your work, your physical work to prepare your physical body as being 10% more than you think everybody else will do.
Okay. So that's the barometer.
10% more. Do 10 more push-ups, sit-ups, 10 more sprints, 10 more of everything. And I talk about, the influence that my mom had was that I was never enough, right? That was her particular psychosis, was that her kids were never good enough. And so I think I integrated that into my, my personal image was I have to keep striving in order to be enough. And even when I retired, 4 years ago, I struggled for a couple of years The reason, one of the reasons I wrote this book eventually is because I realized that I was enough. I had done enough, but I had to get that message from my wife. One morning she sat down across from me and she said, "You did enough. You are enough. In my eyes, we have enough. You are enough." And I think that's a message that we fail to give ourselves, even when we're midlife or mid-career, or, you know, like Federer telling everybody, you know, I lost 54% of my points, and yet I'm number one. I was the world champion.
You know what's very interesting about that? It shows you how analytical he is, and he and his team are, about understanding what it takes to win. Because the mindset is important for us to be successful. Kind of like what this podcast is about, really. It's about that ability to not, failures and setbacks can be quite detrimental to us if we don't understand the benefits of failure. If we don't understand the benefits of setbacks, because they're valuable learning opportunities. So the author, an entrepreneur, Seth Godin, in one of his books, I don't know if it's one of his books or something, I heard him say it, but he said it a number of times. So he says that if I fail more than you, then I win. Because as an entrepreneur, similar to talk about, I know when we mentioned your three favorite people for dinner, we're going to talk about that later, but one of your three is a massive exponent of this, that ability to fail but understand there's an opportunity here that I wasn't appreciative before. So I'm always curious about how often do we're so traumatized by the failure that all these opportunities that the failure is providing, they're just slipping away into the ether, because we just don't have the ability to kind of like pause, take a deep breath, and actually and give ourselves credit for the fact that we had the confidence and the courage to go after something, whether it be a job, whether it be maybe they wanted to cycle 20 miles or something, but we let the failure totally control our ability to move our life in the right direction, because we're not taking note of those seeds, those little nuggets of growth, of opportunities that could be our new foundations.
Yeah. The more times you get to try is the key. Like, if you deliberately put obstacles in your way, and I'm not being just stoic about things. I mean, I think you've got to decide within parameters, what am I realistically, what would I like to be good at? And then try and try and try and try to be good at that. There's a sports tracking service called Strava. It's worldwide now. When I first joined, I think there were 14,000 people on it, and now there are 20 million or something. And I have certain segments that I ride in my daily bike rides. And if you have the fastest time on a segment, it's called a king of the mountain.
Okay.
And so you're number one. You own the course record for that segment. And some of them are very short. Some of them is a climb or a descent or a sprint or something. And some of them are longer. But I like to concentrate on the ones that are under 2 minutes, because it's a particular area that is fulfilling for me to try those. And I have one particular segment that I've been riding for many years. I've ridden that segment 753 times.
Wow.
And I love to try to see how quickly I can ride that segment. Just me. I don't want to be in a group. I want to be completely alone. And this is all athletes, all age groups, all time, all recorded time on this app, Strava.
Oh, wow.
And have you heard of it?
You know what? When you said it, my instinct was no, I haven't heard of it. But as you're explaining it to me, my my sense is telling me that I've heard about it, but the insights that you're kindly providing me are a lot more in depth than the sort of the limited working knowledge I have.
Well, you can look it up, and it's fun for me because it's almost like it's my athletic social media, and I have the fastest time on that segment.
That's incredible.
I got it a couple of months ago, and by a couple of seconds versus 34,000 athletes, all ages, all genders. And it's just because I tried more and I was willing to fail. I was willing to come up short, and I came up short hundreds of times for that one time when I didn't.
Okay. Can I ask a question around your willingness to fail? So this is kind of like maybe will be helpful for people that maybe they feel maybe going that extra length, making that one attempt gives them like a severe feeling of discomfort. Because I think sometimes there's this thing about when we when we put our all into something and we still come up short, sometimes we can be a bit embarrassed by that, or we don't want to have that sense of, sometimes we feel that everybody's watching when in reality they're not. So people that maybe don't have a good relationship with failure that are watching this now, do you have any advice that comes to mind how they can refine that? I know we're going to get into your frameworks and stuff in a second, but I just thought I'd ask that question because it's front of mind.
Yeah, I think the simple answer is there's no other way. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but I think that's the truth for me, is that the only way to achieve anything is by embracing failure. All no answers for salespeople are one step closer to yes. And I'm assuming that's your goal. So in a negotiation, you need to allow for disagreement. A successful negotiation allows for disagreement. William Ury wrote a wonderful book called Getting to Yes. The reality is you have to embrace a lot of no answers and then be creative around where did you find agreement? And eventually you get to yes. But the pathway is through a lot of disagreement and creative rethinking of the situation. And we can do that in every aspect of our life, but there's no other way to succeed without failure. Thomas Edison, I mean, we mentioned this briefly earlier, but he had a notebook after notebook of 10,000 experiments that he did that didn't work. And that's the wonderful record of his willingness to embrace failure in order to find that one thing that did work, that changed the world. A light bulb. Literally, the light bulb went off. And I think we find that you have to have an ability to let go of the bad strokes in rowing, let go of the disappointment, the falling short. In athletics, I think we learn nothing when we win. When we lose, we want to know everything about it. That's the most productive thing to happen, is to lose. In a competition, you learn not only of these wonderful interactions between the athletes on the tennis court, where they know that they both gave everything they felt they had today, and somebody won. Somebody was able to integrate the failure better, like you said about Djokovic. That at that level, the ability to recover from a setback more quickly, to have a clearer picture, and to engage in self-talk that's productive, is the only way. And that's how those athletes, they win more.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about how cool would it be to kind of almost flip the script where you kind of do this, but I think I'd almost want it to almost be an instinct that when it's almost like Christmas, like particularly when we're a child and we can't sleep that night, we end up getting a few hours sleep, but particularly when we're young, but we wake up in the morning confused because we know there's some presents to unwrap. And how cool would it be to kind of have that same relationship with failure, that the next day or the next time we go out, we've got gift presents to unwrap because it's the new information, it's the new insights, and it's kind of having that relationship with you as an athlete, you know, you would know if something doesn't go according to plan, maybe in training or maybe even in the event, you'll be able to learn what they are, and you'll be able to accept the gifts, the new insights, the new information, the new presence, whatever we want to call it. And actually, once you do that, you know that it's highly, highly, highly likely that you're going to be better prepared for your training, better prepared for your next race, and there's a very good likelihood that you're going to perform better.
Yeah. Give you a quick 30-second story. When I was applying to boarding school, which you call your private schools, right? Like Eton and so on.
Yeah.
Right. So we have one in the U.S. It was Andover, Phillips Academy, Andover, and Exeter, are two top schools. And I was applying to Andover. I was coming out of a public school background, and I never thought of myself as being very good at math or physics or any of those things. I just had better grasp of language. And I knew I was good at language. So I was sitting in the interview with the guy who was the admissions director, and he leaned over to me and he said, "What's more, 9/5 or 5/9?" And here's a math problem. And so I said to him, honestly, I'm not very good at those. So I asked him a question. I said, "What do you think about?" And I changed the subject, and we wound up engaging around my outdoor life and what I had learned from athletics and how I had applied that to academics. And he didn't push me on the math question that he had given me. But when we walked out of the interview, he put his arm around my shoulder and he said, "No one has ever done that before." I reframed the situation that I was uncomfortable with into a conversation that I was comfortable with. And I pulled him into that conversation. And he said that he felt that was extraordinary. We wound up being friends for years after that. I now got into that school. And I think that was the turning point in that, in that interview, was that I was able to take a bad situation and reframe it into one where I felt comfortable. And I think that's that's me letting go of what would have been a bad stroke, right? That would have been I could have gone out of that interview saying, "Oh, obviously 9/5 is more,"
Yeah.
I should have known that. But I realized that wasn't an area that I was going to figure out on the fly at that age. And so I said, let's talk about something else. And I had read an article in the waiting room, literally, about how this guy had founded Outward Bound in the United States. And I was just fascinated by that. And so I got him talking about himself and about his career and how he brought those concepts of surviving an outdoor life to founding Outward Bound in the United States. And this was the guy, he was the founder. And I had just happened to read an article while I was waiting for the interview. So I used that. Yeah. And it made all the difference.
I wonder if that was fated that you should read that at that time.
Yeah.
So that
I think, there's a silent hand that's moving all the time in our lives.
Yeah.
And we just have to let it move us instead of fighting it. And it will move you in the time and the place that's right for you. And if you let that happen and you be prepared, then, you're going to have a good outcome.
So how might we know when that's happening? Is it intuition, or is there something else going on, or is it energy, or maybe is it instinct? I don't know.
Yeah, I think be present and stop trying to maneuver things.
Okay.
And be honest with yourself. I love to say that I never have to remember who I told what, as long as I tell the truth.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're true to yourself, you're going to be all right. Somebody else might not like the outcome. They might not. Is if you always tell the truth, you never have to remember who you told what.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that. What I definitely wanted to touch upon. So something pretty profound happened to you that changed your life forever, and it's led to you competing as an athlete again, books and a lot of different things. But I think we touched upon this at the outset. So you were in an accident where you were hit by a bike. So I'll let you explain because your overview clearly will be a lot better than mine.
I was on a country road with one other bike rider. And we had ridden 50 miles together in the morning, and then we decided to go out for another 50 together. And so we were working well together, switching off, him being in front of me and I being in front of him. And that's a normal thing that pro-level bike racers do, is they share the lead.
Yeah.
And so we were switching off, rolling about 25 miles an hour. And we came through an intersection where we did not have a stop sign. And I happened to be in the front. And a guy coming from my left ran the stop sign on the gas and hit me going 50 miles an hour. And I flew 100 feet and landed on my face
100 feet. Wow.
in the gravel. And I was actually on the car about a half a second. And the mind is amazing, has walled off that whole experience for me. I don't have any recollection of the actual hit, but I've been able to reconstruct it from accident records and from the one eyewitness, actually two eyewitnesses that were at the scene. One was Pete, my buddy, who I was riding with, who was only 4 feet behind me. So
he was seeing everything.
If you do the physics, he was untouched. So that's how fast the guy was going.
Yeah.
He took me out in just a half a second, and Pete did not get hit.
Get impacted.
But the other guy that was at the accident was the driver. And I took off the rear view mirror with my rib cage from back to front and broke the windshield with my helmet, probably saved my life. And then my left shoulder went through the right rear passenger window, and my shoulder caught the frame of the car, and that's what threw me.
Wow, how are you here today after that? That's incredible.
And so I don't remember anything else from right there. But it turns out that Pete was the chief of anesthesiology at a hospital in the town near where we were bike riding, an MD. And the driver of the SUV was an MD teaching emergency medicine at a university in the same state. In the ambulance, their medical training kicked in. They realized I was completely out, but that I was breathing and that I had a pulse. And in the ambulance, I gave Pete a phone number for my girlfriend. Turned out to be accurate. And then I checked out.
Okay.
And I found myself in the presence of the higher power. And it was like that we had known each other forever. There was no need for introductions, and I was welcome to ask anything. So I said, why me? Why this? Why now? What do you want from me? And God said, there was a fatal accident in your future that only I can see. And because I'm not done with you, I chose this accident because it will change the course of your life so that that fatal accident is no longer in your future. But you have to decide to survive. And 90 minutes later, I woke up in an ER, and there was a woman in green scrubs pulling a string out of my chin, tying a knot, stitching it, and she pulled a string out of my forehead and tied knots. And cut the thread. I'm thinking, stitches. Why do I need stitches? And I tried to turn my head to see where I was, and I couldn't move my neck. I was in some kind of a brace. And I remember this. My girlfriend, whom I could see out of the corner of my eyes, was holding a red, white, and blue sponge on my lips at the end of a popsicle stick. And I said, "Where am I?" She said, "Well, you're in a hospital. You were in a bad bicycle accident, and you're now in a safe place." And I said, "Is my bike okay?" That was really my first thought. Was thinking, I was on a bike ride. My bike is okay. I can finish. And that is a question that my mother used to always say whenever we would crash. She would rush over to the bike and she'd say, "Is the bike okay?" We're laying in the curb bleeding.
Yeah.
And she knew that if the bike was okay, we could get up and finish. She could put a Band-Aid on it later. She could fix us up later. And that's the paradigm I grew up with, was that if the bike was okay, you can continue. So I said, "Is the bike okay?" And then I checked out again. And I woke up in a trauma ward, and I was in the trauma ward for 7 days. So that's
7 days.
7 days in trauma, and then 7 weeks in a rehab hospital where I was trying to learn to walk again.
So you had to learn to walk again?
Yes. I was paralyzed on my left side and confined to a wheelchair. And I have to say, a lot of the very early physical therapy ended in tears. I mean, because I wanted to do things that my body could no longer do.
Mm.
And I eventually started to race other wheelchairs down the hallway with my one good arm. And I began to make some progress, and people concept of emotional wealth that I explore in the book, in the 7 elements of emotional wealth.
So it'd be great to touch upon what emotional wealth is, just for people. I'm assuming that there's a lot of people listening to this may be keen to understand what emotional wealth is and what are the pillars that underpin it.
Yeah. Can you turn on sharing? Because I can bring up a picture of it.
Bear with me one moment. I should be able to do that.
Okay. Yeah. Did I send a request? Yeah.
No, I think you should be able to. So you should be able to have access now.
See, hold on. Let me just be sure I have it up.
So if anybody's watching this, they should be able to see in a second.
Okay, now I have the screen that I can share. Let me go back in there. There you are. I'll hit share. There we go. Okay, that screen.
Perfect.
Is this helpful? Can you see it?
In a second. I can see it now.
Okay, great. So everything in our life begins with our dreams. We don't even get out of bed unless we dream about something. We have to aspire to something. I think that's the beginning of everything that we do. And then we have a goal. We aspire to a goal, and then we have to be inspired to take action, and then we have to perspire. We have to sweat.
Okay.
So we have aspiration, inspiration, and perspiration that are relating to our dreams. And this leads us to all of the other areas of our life, around our health, our life of learning, our earning wealth, our giving back, our giving wealth, our love relationships, and our connection to the divine. And of course, my mother was involved in the early stages of this, and I had 6 of these, the ones in the outer circle. I had this idea that this is why I had survived the accident, that I was supposed to tell the world about these 6 emotional bank accounts, because I felt that these were emotional bank accounts that allowed me to survive this crash and to thrive in the future, to overcome the setback. And she said, yeah, these are great, but you're missing one. I said, what is it, Mom? She said, your dreams. You're missing your dreams. Everything begins with your dreams. And so that's why the dreams are in the center of this. But imagine how you visualize and plan to reach your goals. And when you have a setback, what motivates you to keep going?
Yeah. So
that's it.
So just in relation to this, and forgive me, what is the framework called? Is the emotional framework?
Yeah, it's emotional framework relates directly to, this is the front cover
Of your book.
Of the book. It's called Antidote. So this is a antidote that no doctor can prescribe and no nurse can inject into you. It's an emotional bank account that you have. We all have these. And believe it or not, you have a positive balance in every area of your life. But sometimes you need to work on certain areas. So I've developed a quiz, a life satisfaction survey that goes with this. And the idea is that for you to quickly figure out on a scale of 1 to 7, how do you rank yourself in these 7 areas of your life? And when you see how you're doing, then we explore the resources that you used in order to get a high score in any one of these areas. And then let's take that new awareness is that, oh, I have a life of learning. I can figure anything out if I can just apply my academic method to learning anything new. Now the world is at your fingertips, right? So how do we bring those resources? Let's say you have a high score in this area, but you have a low score in the love element of the framework. To help you raise up that score, what are the kind of resources that you need to bring to bear? Well, you already have those resources. So you can balance within your accounts these different parts of your life. And one becomes valuable to the next.
Okay, that's great. So if we're weak in an area, once we go through the quiz, it brings that to the fore. And then once it's come to the fore, then we can look at, which is great, because I think awareness is great. If we don't have awareness, then we don't even look at these pillars and we don't realize that potentially we're living in deficit. But just in relation to if we are in deficit in one of those, does that give us the awareness to see how we can mitigate that and get to the point that we're in credit with that particular that particular example?
Yeah. The reality is, if we look for success in work life or success anywhere in the world, for the most part, it happens in teams, right? We don't do things alone. We achieve our biggest things. The biggest achievements come from teams of people. And so if we look at where we're strong, then that helps us to identify when we interact with others. We find other people who are strong in areas where we perceive ourselves to be weak. And that allows us to move from our awareness into an alignment for a more successful outcome. So this allows people to quickly understand where they are, see areas that they have an emotional bank account that they may not have been aware of, and to look at the resources and build up areas or find people to collaborate with to achieve an outcome. They find people who have a strength that you don't have.
Yeah. Okay. That's wonderful. So just a question around that. So is the book designed for people to maybe do this every 6 months, every 3 months, so or whatever period, just so that we can reference where we're at, and if we're
Great question.
Yeah.
Each chapter, yeah, absolutely. Each chapter is a story that I tell because this was an easy way for me to introduce people to the concepts. But at the end of the chapter, we have a quick checklist of things that people can look at in their own life to find an alignment between the concept that they just learned and their own life. And then I have a section that's called Your Turn. And it is a workbook. Even in the audiobook, it's a downloadable workbook that they can print and mark up. In the printed book, it is included in the book. In every chapter, there's a workbook, and I ask questions about how you see yourself. Do you see yourself in this chapter? How could things have been different?
Yeah.
What would you do in your own life? And it helps people integrate the concepts, which are broad concepts, I realize, as a part of the framework. These elements then can become more personal that way.
I think the work bit's important as well, because I think I learned from doing. Doing is an important way for me to embed and to, just to have more clarity. So I love that part of it as well.
Mhm.
And I guess for people that are looking to get the book, there are various ways they can engage it, whether it be audio, whether it be visually learning. You've done an audio book for it as well.
Yeah, the book is print linked. It's also a Kindle,
Okay, perfect.
and it's an audiobook.
Okay.
And of course, I'm the only one who doesn't recognize the reader on the audiobook because I recorded it.
Okay. That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
That was a very interesting experience, but I highly recommend it.
Okay. Okay. And I love the title, by the way, Antidote, because it's almost self-explanatory. A new emotional wealth framework to build resilience. And
Yeah,
I love what you're doing there as well, that you're helping us. You've given us the awareness, you've given us the know the how because of the framework, but
yeah,
also we're, as a byproduct, we're developing resilience. And just to say, and also what I like about it as well is that if we're in those areas where we're in deficit, we can acknowledge that. But not only can we acknowledge it, because we've gone through the process, we've identified it, we know that's an area that we can work on. And
that's right.
because we know that we're in deficit. And I love that analogy. I love that clarity around that. Okay, so we'll get a link to this, and we'll put this in the show notes. And another part, an important part of your journey, I appreciate that we're getting towards the end now, but I just wanted to bring this up. Also, that you not only did you have this horrific bike accident, but in your recovery, what you diagnosed with cancer as well,
Yes, and COVID.
and COVID. Wow.
Yeah, I had a couple of tough stretches there, and who knows? Maybe I was just in a part of my life where I was overreaching.
Yeah.
But as I started to make a comeback, I was not making any progress physically, and I wanted to be me again, right? I wanted to be the old version of me. One of the things that my brother, who's an MD, came to my hospital bed when I was in the rehab hospital, and he said, I know that you'll heal broken bones because I've seen you crash and I've seen you heal before. He said, but I worry that you will have a difficult time with your persona of the champion, that you'll never recover from that setback.
What? So when he the
He
setback.
knew me. Yeah, he knew me as a bicycling champion because I
Okay.
I've been in 1,100 races. I've been on the podium 250 times. I've been a three-time national champion in cycling, and I've held records for the 10 mile and rowing records for 2,000 meters. And he said, your persona of yourself as a champion is the thing I worry about the most. And so the question is, how do you heal a broken ego? Because now this is what I was facing, was how do I heal that part of me that's my perception of me? It's my image of me. It's not the body, the bone, the flesh. And that's where the tears really poured out of me, because I feared that he was right. That I was at a moment in my life where I thought that looked impossible. And, I just, as I got out of the wheelchair and I eventually was able to learn to walk, I wanted to ride, but I was struggling with making any progress. And I realized that I went back and I did just a quick think, which was, what did I do to get myself to the level of physical capability that I was at before? Right here now, I'm in my late 50s. I'm not a teenager anymore. It's harder to physically get back from a setback like this, broken bones and broken spirit. And I said, the discipline that I had that got me to a U.S. national championship level was an Olympic level mindset. And I said, well, let's just do that again. Why should age be the differentiator? Mm-hmm. And I put myself into a weekly training regimen that was 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. It was hard because I wasn't physically able to do the things that I used to do. But I realized even in my cycling community, there were women's rides that I could go on that were not the men's rides I had been on, but I learned to love them. And I wonder why more guys didn't ride the women's rides. I mean, this is an option for you. And those became my best friends during the recovery. So I found something that I could do. And then I evolved step by step because I was competitive with myself. And I think that was the main thing, was that people waited for me until they didn't have to wait anymore. And now that I'm fully recovered, I'm the one who waits for them. Wow. But that's part of the dance, right?
Yeah.
Is that I can now help the riders who need help, to have that hand on their back, the way that they help me and put a hand on my back.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And just around people overcoming difficult moments, like you've just beautifully described your situation where you're able to overcome those difficult moments. So actually, this is the question. So do you think in order for us to overcome difficult moments, we have to be able to visualize a compelling future? Do we have to have something? So when you and your mum talk about dreams, are we having to don't let the dream fade? Then we can use that as our spark, maybe, or inspiration.
I believe that we choose everything that happens, ultimately.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. And so my perception and reframing, again, just like I reframed in my interview as a kid, I think that that's a gift that I have. I decided to reframe this as not as a setback, but an opportunity. And I'm thankful that I was the first one through the intersection that day. I just happened to be in the lead when we came through that intersection. I'm the one that got hit by the car. What a blessing that is, because I had the physical prowess to recover from that. It redirected my life. I would never have had the epiphany of the 7 elements of the emotional wealth framework that forced me to be creative about that and to create something new that could be of value to other people. First couple of years, I couldn't even talk the story. It was just so much trauma. And it was layers and layers and layers of difficult stuff that I had to wade through. But I eventually was able to reframe it as this wonderful opportunity that I had to use this experience to show people that recovery is possible. And that setbacks are a natural part of life. That in fact, we choose them. And it's a way of burnishing our own spirit in this lifetime, if you will, without getting too deep into that we choose to be here this time around and to work on certain things. And I believe that we have the opportunity to recycle as a spirit body back into the human realm. And without going too deeply into that, I think I reframed all of this as an opportunity for me to grow in a new way. And I've always worked hard. I've always struggled in order to achieve something, whether it was behind the eight ball academically or behind the eight ball physically, or not having a financial plan for my retirement. All of these things were areas of my life that were not worked out. And the framework is my epiphany that allowed me to work out practical ways to help people find their own path.
No, I love this.
And so that's, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know the author, Stephen Pressfield?
Pardon me?
Do you know the author, Stephen Pressfield? Stephen Pressfield.
I'm sorry, I don't.
The author. Okay, so part of what you said, it just takes me to something I heard him say, is that he talks about the idea of hitting rock bottom. So he says something along these lines, potentially not verbatim, but something along these lines. So hitting rock bottom to him is an opportunity, because I guess it resets him, and he knows, because he's had to do this, is that where he gets comfort is that if he hits rock bottom, he knows with work, application, and awareness, he can overcome anything. So which is interesting to me, because you've got a framework which can help everybody overcome difficult moments, that we can drill down into what they potentially are. But similarly, I think you and Stephen are kind of both elite at being able to not becoming victim to circumstances, which I think is very easy to become, or let circumstances, pretty much control us. And I think where you guys come into play is that you're able to use those moments as, you've got the awareness to use those situations as new opportunities, which I think to me, that's a huge skill, because I think for a lot of us, we just don't know where. So in England, we have a saying, maybe have in the States as well, sometimes in difficult moments, you can't see the woods for the trees. And what your framework does is it gives us that clarity where we can just drill down into what that problem area is, and then we can work on that, and then we can really fix that area.
Yeah. Speaking for the moment about the idea of being the victim, because I think that plays out in a lot of different parts of our life, whether you're the victim of a bad boss or the bad relationship, or, I don't have the voice I wanted. I wanted to sing like, an opera star or a popular singer. And those are the 1% aspirations.
Yeah.
That's kind of ridiculous, right? Don't be the victim. Sing anyway.
Yeah.
And in my case, here I had an opportunity. I had enough insurance to pay for my hospital bills. The doctor that hit me had a $2 million retirement account that my attorney said to me, and this is 6 months into the case, which became a serious part-time job just to deal with the insurance case. And he said, it's going to take a couple of years of depositions and we can pursue it. But he's got a lot of money that you could tap into, and you could go after that. And I found myself checking out of the room at that moment. Here we were talking about suing somebody for a recovery of the old me, right? Which at one moment in my life seemed impossible. And I kind of left the room. Psychologically speaking, I was just away from the meeting for a moment. And I made a conscious decision to forgive the guy instead of to sue him. And he made a mistake. I don't know whether he was on a phone or something, but he was on the gas trying to jump an intersection to beat a truck that was behind me. And I discovered all of this later, but once I had all those facts and I understood that he was just, he made a mistake. And I realized that I had probably had the physical resources to recover. I didn't die. And my life was going to be different, but I didn't want to ruin my life suing him. And I didn't want to ruin his life by being sued by me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know all the answers at that point, but I chose forgiveness. I chose to take a different path. And at that moment that I made that decision, it was like a bluebird just lit off from my heart, and it healed me. And I came back into the room and I spoke to my attorney and I said, I'm done. I don't want to pursue the case anymore. And, I'm sorry it happened, but I want to forgive the guy and I want to move on with my life.
Probably couldn't believe that, or he or she probably couldn't believe that.
And my attorneys looked at me. He was quiet for a moment, and he said to me, he said, John, he said, that is the most wonderful thing I've heard.
Oh, wow.
In my whole career. He said, I've made a career suing people and I'm a personal injury lawyer. He said, but I honor you for saying that and for choosing forgiveness. He totally understood and he supported me. And it was a pivot point in my whole relationship with my injury and choosing not to be a victim in the future and internalizing that. And instead, I chose healing. And that was a tough decision, right? Anybody else would look at that and say, why didn't you sue him for a couple $1 million? You don't know what's going to happen to your neck, whatever. You're not going to bike race anymore. Your life as you know it is over. And I said, I'm willing to embrace the unknowns. And I have enough. And I paid for my hospital bills and my dental bills and all the things that came with being hit by a car at 50 miles an hour. And I think that was the moment where I truly began to heal.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's an incredible story. It's really insightful as well, because I sense from the way that you've explained that that if you went on this process of maybe litigated it and trying to get compensation, that it almost feels that intuitively you knew that would be detrimental to you and him.
I chose that. I chose a different path, right? But I think it's and again, it's pursuing that awareness that there's a limit to everything.
Yeah.
And I chose not to be the victim.
Yeah.
But it was clearly that was an option.
Yeah, that was the obvious option. It was the option that I don't know a percentage, but I imagine that a healthy percentage would go for the victim option. And also I can imagine as well that family, I'm just thinking, that's actually a courageous decision as well, because it just goes against the grain, and most family and friends would be thinking, what are you doing? Because they're not in your mind, spirit and body, so they don't know that actually you're not just forgiveness means that it was giving you a new opportunity, a new life. But
I think my choice at that moment was, if you sue somebody, it makes your recovery and your life somebody else's responsibility, right? And I wanted to be in charge of my recovery.
Okay.
And I think that was the moment where I was able to take ownership of my future. And instead of allowing it to be, worked out in a courtroom or between lawyers, I got to fully own it. And that required courage. But it also, I just had that moment where I was out of the room and I came to a conclusion, and I look back on that now and I say, wow, I feel so fortunate, that I was able to have that perspective that allowed me to make that choice.
Okay. Something that we said before we hit the record button that you asked me, that we said a point that we would reference, is coachability. So maybe you want to describe coachability and how you benefited from that.
I think that's something that we find out about ourselves at a young age, if we're coachable or not.
Can we become better at? Can we, if we're not very good at being or having that coachability, can we improve on that?
Yeah, and I think, and that comes part of my perfect failure, right? Is that I think we perceive vulnerability as weakness, and you cannot be coached if you are not vulnerable.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you need to invite a third party who's an expert at something, whatever it is, to come look at you. There's a great story about a surgeon who's deep into his career and felt like he was just not as good as he should be in the operating room. And he said, I hired another surgeon to observe me in the operatory. And after the first session, he came at me with 10 pages of notes. And he told me I was lifting my elbow, and that was just a sign of weakness. And he coached me to understand the areas where I had become overconfident.
Okay.
But it required this world-renowned surgeon to become vulnerable, to be coachable. He said it made all the difference in the outcome for him. And I think that's something that I got introduced to by my mother unwittingly, because she was so engaged in my life, wanting me to be better at everything. And my brother's response to her was, get out of my life. You know, I don't want to see you. Don't touch me. And my response was, what are we going to do next? Right? And she taught me to read faster. She sat below me and looked up at my eyes while I read books, and she would click a pencil on a page and help me read one line at a time and move down the page. And she was constantly working with us. You know, what her mindset was, we can do this better. We can do anything better. And I realized at a very early age, I had capacity for that. So my dad left when we were 10 years old. I was 10 years old. And I'm very fortunate that people stepped into my life and became coaches for me. And that made all the difference. I mean, I really truly had a different path because I would show a little bit of promise in something, and somebody would show up and say, I would like to ride with you. I would like to coach you. I think you could be in the Olympics. My violin teacher, because I was so excited about learning the violin, I'm willing to practice 3 hours a day, that my mom did not have the money to pay for private lessons. A friend of hers in a prayer group was playing in the national, or in the symphony in our state, the highest level symphony. And she was a violin teacher part-time on the side. She taught me for free, and I became her star student.
Oh, wow.
Because I was willing to work and I was coachable. And so there was this element of coachability all throughout my life that I realized I had some capacity for vulnerability. And I think that's the essential element, is to be willing to invite an expert to come in and look at you, whatever it is you're doing, and listen and integrate those ideas and try a new way. Try the next thing, just one little thing. And, you know, the British cycling team became number one in the world by making very small improvements. Small, incremental performance enhancements is the way they categorized it. And they put $30 million a year against that door, right? They showed up, they gave a lot of resources to that idea, and the guys on the team had to be coachable. And if they weren't coachable, they were not on the team. They were off the team. So I think if you want to get better, you got to be coachable, and you got to be willing to fail, because that's the only path to success.
Okay. No, I love that. Okay, so we're getting towards the end now. So I think I've got 2 questions. So how can people contact you to find out a little bit more about you? And obviously, where is the best place to get your book, Antidote?
Antidotethebook.com. So that's it. Antidotethebook.com is my website. And they can click to order the book right there. There's a couple of ways to buy it, and you can get it on Amazon and Kindle, and also on audiobook. And then you can also buy it at a discount if you want to buy a larger quantity. I have an account with Ingram Spark, and there's a page on my website where you can buy the book at a discount. And I can provide, there's a contact form right there on my website. And the link to the quiz, the life satisfaction survey, is just about to go live. So please be patient. But that's another area where I can directly help people through coaching, because I've been grateful and coachable. I've developed some skill set in that area to help other people.
Okay, lovely. Okay, so I get all the links. They will go into the show notes. Sorry, I've got a penultimate question. So something that I've written down or I've typed down, and I wondered if this relates to some of what we've discussed today. But this is a slightly it's in a territory of what we covered today, but it's more business. So you scaled a business from a startup into an 80 million a market success, which is phenomenal, by the way. But were you using some of the tools that we've discussed today? Because I can't imagine that went smoothly all the way, because no business ever does. So I imagine there were setbacks and challenges there. Is there an alignment from what we've discussed today and maybe some tool that you'd have had to have used in that business journey?
Great question. I think it relates really very directly to what we've been talking about today. I have spent the last 25 years working only in early stage companies. That was the result of a conversation I had in early 2000s with a legendary investment banker. And I developed a mindset of fail fast.
Okay.
And in the business enterprises that I get involved with, I look for ways to test whatever the thinking is in that environment, and to quickly come to a failure point or understand what's working. But usually it's what's not working. And most businesses fail because they hold on to this kind of fantasy that because it's their idea, it's good.
Yeah, totally.
And the reality is you have to ask the market always. The market controls whether you're good or not. The success is whether you have customers and revenue.
Yeah, absolutely.
And forever, that's been the parameter, is if you don't have customers and revenue, then you're not going to succeed. You're not going to survive as a business. And so I want to come through that cycle quickly. And I have a 6-point cycle that I run businesses through to find out, to help them fail fast and test again, find a new hypothesis, a new prototype, whatever it is, test another market. What happened in this particular business is that it was formed around the dental business, and the entrepreneur behind it and the programmer had created a way to manage everything for a dental practice online. And that business wound up not able to hold on to their customers because speeds were not fast enough in the early 2000s. Modem speeds were not fast enough.
Okay,
so
I remember modems, yeah.
Yeah, people had, and we're doing better now, but people wanted to compare everything to Windows. And so I came into that environment and I said, what's working? And he said, well, the schedule. I want to just focus on the schedule this time and not worry about running the whole office, just the schedule. And it turned out that in the dental business, there was some competition in that area that allowed us to not thrive. And we were spending a lot of resources pursuing a way to get to market by going to trade shows and, signing up individual customers. And I decided I didn't have enough time left in my life to do that. I'd spent 40 years in trade shows. I knew how to do that and how hard and how resource intensive that was. So I said, we need to reframe this like I had done at other parts of my life. And I said, we need to reframe this into a library of code that we can license into other markets. So we're not stuck in dental. And I don't know what those other markets are, but we need to keep reaching out into areas that we don't know and find people who need what we do, but that don't know about us yet. And we, through a rather, clumsy, like bees bumbling through the pasture and finding flowers and pollen, I found my way to the veterinary market. And we built a custom solution for veterinarians to manage all of the communications and scheduling for, and we wound up in a contract with the number one distributor in that market. We tried to have a contract with 5 different companies, and we wound up with one. And after about 10 years of effort in that area, we scaled the business to 3,000 hospitals on 3 continents, all English speaking, covering 100 million animals for their pet appointments. And that allowed us to scale the business and eventually sell it. But we had to get out of the business that we created the application for.
Yeah, that's really interesting as well. I'm sure that should be interesting for anybody that's listening who's in a business that they've come up with an idea, but maybe the market isn't your customers. I'm just not gravitating towards it. So you say that you've got a program that you can put businesses through. So if their business does need to reframe, then you can dictate that, and then you can work with them to look at what that frame should look like.
Right, and actually,
look like.
For a $50 subscription on my website, it's not big money. The point is, it's a commitment from somebody. You get a 30-minute coaching session with me, and I'll look at everything about your business. I'll take an input on everything that you're doing now, and I'll give you 30 minutes of insight into how you can improve the outcome.
Okay. Wonderful. So I'll get a link, and I'll put a link to that specific.
There'll be a button on my website that's just called coaching.
Okay, cool.
They can hit that link and they can fill a contact form to me.
Okay, lovely. Okay, wonderful. We'll do that. Okay, so finally we've got to the final question, which is the recurring question, which is, if you could invite 3 inspirational people for dinner, they could be a liable past. Who might you invite?
Yeah, I love that question, and I appreciate you asking it. I would invite Jesus because his life is really mostly about failure. We celebrate Jesus for a lot of things, but mostly it's about his suffering and his failure. And I would invite Thomas Edison because he was so willing to embrace the concept of finding things that didn't work that led him to the one thing that did, where the light bulb turned on. And I would love to have dinner with Ray Dalio.
Yeah.
And that would, because I think he has he's found his way through colossal failure to a monumental success story in Bridgewater. And I love the way that he breaks down the mega trends of our day into very practical understanding. And I would just be fascinated to have a, sit down, chat with him.
Yeah, you should send him a copy of your book.
Okay, I will.
You should definitely do that. Send him a copy of your book and maybe put a note in there to say, if you're ever in Washington where you live, I'll buy you a copy. Copies on me.
That's great. Great idea. Thank you.
You can't never know.
Yeah, I can't send a copy to Jesus or Thomas Edison, but Ray is it's reachable.
Definitely do that. And I think I said to you at the start, I don't know if I said it before we recorded. I think I said it before we recorded, that I can imagine Ray loving this conversation and contributing massively to it. So I'm emphatic he will like your book. So definitely I would do that. If I was the author of Antidote, he would be getting a copy.
Thank you.
He would be getting a copy. JC, I've gone far beyond the allocated time, but it's been amazing meeting you. Really enjoyed this discussion. I just feel a natural sort of energy towards your journey, to what you're doing, and to you in general. So thanks for your time today. It's been wonderful to meet you and to sort of just listen.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's really been a delightful time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of My Perfect Failure. We're always looking to know about the things we do well and maybe the things that we don't. So If you can advise, that would be fabulous. And you can find me at paul@myperfectfailure.com, or you can find me via the contact page on the website. So take care for now. Bye.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.